think they protested for? The thug, the criminal. Because they're hollering police brutality. Are you kidding me? Police brutality? How about black brutality? You black people, my black people, you are the most violent I have ever seen in my life. You're shooting at the police. Police drops your ass. Oh, poor so-and-so. He died due to police brutality. 127 homicides later, y'all want to holler police brutality? Black people, you're a joke. You're tearing up communities for thugs and criminals. You think the police are out here for fun? You think they're out here for games? They're not going to tuck you in. They're not going to give you a cookie and sing you a lullaby and tuck you in. No, they're going to pop a cap in your ass. You shoot at them, they're going to shoot at you.
Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Do you think Black lives matter? Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Do you think Black lives matter?
Holy shit. Holy shit.
Affiliated radio show calls for a race war. In a disgusting audio broadcast via Blog Talk Radio yesterday, an individual who admitted affiliation with the Black Lives Matter movement called for listeners to murder white people and police, declaring it open season for executions.
Open season on killing whites and white police officers. And I want to talk about the shooting of the white deputy sheriff in Houston, Texas. It's open season on killing whites and white police officers, and probably killing cops, period. It's open season, picking them off. Today, we live in a time where the white man will be picked off, and there's nothing he can do about it. His day is up. His time is up. We will witness more executions and killing of white people and cops than we ever have before.
Black Lives Matter is a social media movement that had tried to gel around Ferguson and the Eric Gardner case and some other cases that came up. And very rapidly, it was posited as being in opposition to the police. And sometimes, like any of these loose organizations, some people pop off and say dumb things. But and on the other hand, though, it started being lifted up as these folks are opposed to police and they're opposed to cops and all lives matter. You know, so the notion was somehow saying Black Lives Matter was reverse racism or suggesting that other people's lives didn't matter, or police officers' lives didn't matter. And whenever we get bogged down in that kind of discussion, we know where that goes. I mean, that's just down the old track. So let me just suggest this. I think everybody understands all lives matter. Everybody wants strong, effective
was arrested back in September after videos emerged of her declaring, quote, open season on crackers and suggesting people start walking up on untrained police officers and stealing their weapons. She says the videos were selectively edited and never meant for public consumption. Here's a clip.
They've been coming for our throats. They've been coming for our lives. They're killing our women, saying that they committed suicide. They're killing our unarmed men for no reason at all, for petty crimes or nothing at all, for traffic stops. Your tail light out and you get killed.
Superior Court. But now Ned and her attorney say she wasn't threatening cops or white people. She was threatening a group that hacked into a chat session she was having on Google. She claims the very same group stole her videos, edited them, and posted them out of context on the internet. Listen.
I maintain that I have the right to defend myself from these hate-filled rants from this group and their supporters. At no point did I ever want to kill or hurt law enforcement officers, and the unedited version of these videos will prove that fact.
except she and her lawyer never do explain how the statements "kill crackers," "take a gun from a cop day," and "take over police stations" were taken out of context. Latasha Ned, you'll remember, is part of the F-Yo flag movement, an offshoot of Black Lives Matters, and though she now claims that she never threatened white people, while she was being led into the police car and asked, "Did you threaten to kill white people?" she reportedly responded, quote, "Well, they killing us." Watch.
All I did was say defend yourself against people that want to kill us. That's all. I never said anything more than that. I never said anything more than that. So I'm being arrested for what?
Her lawyer claims that rap groups often make similar statements to Latasha Ned, but they're not facing criminal charges, saying people have the right to free speech.
President Obama making a shocking comparison at the National Prayer Breakfast, equating Muslim extremism to Christianity.
And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ.
Well, our next guest is appalled by this analogy. Bishop E.W. Jackson from the Called Church and the founder of Stand joins us now. Bishop, thanks for joining Fox and Friends here.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
What place did Christianity and Christ have in that equation yesterday at the National Prayer Breakfast?
You know, Elizabeth, I have a message for the president with all due respect to him and to the office. Mr. President, if you don't want to give terrorists a recruitment tool, instead of closing Guantanamo Bay, frankly, sir, you ought to close your mouth, because you just gave them a gigantic propaganda tool. They called us crusaders, and you've just confirmed it. Mr. President, we're not on our high horse. What we are is on high alert. And the American people would like for once to know that you're willing to defend Christianity and defend America instead of defending Islam.
Bishop, you served in the Marine Corps for 3 years. You're a veteran. When you talk about propaganda, the only thing propaganda does right now is help recruit for ISIS and strengthen the enemy. For our veterans right now and our military personnel, how much more danger did those words actually put our service members in?
Oh, I think he's given them a gigantic recruitment tool. He's told them, once again, he's apologized for America. He's conjured up the image of crusaders. And he's basically justified exactly what Osama bin Laden was saying, that we are encroaching on them. I would remind the president that the Crusades began in 1096 as a response to Islamic aggression and the fact that they had conquered the Holy Land and they were oppressing Eastern Christians. And there was a response to that. So if the president is even going to cite that as an example, then he ought to get his history complete.
Well, Bishop, you just did something the president won't do. You used the word Islamic. Let me ask you this. Not only did the president not protect Christians and, in fact, really go after them, attacking them by invoking the name of Christ yesterday, some would say, but he continued on the path of not calling the enemy what it is, not saying radical Islam. Don't you believe that in not saying that, he's actually protecting radical Islam by not calling it out?
You know, I don't know how to explain this, but this president does everything he possibly can to defend Islam and does almost nothing to defend the honor of this country. And yes, once again, he's giving them exactly what they want. And, you know, Elizabeth, they're laughing at us because all they see it as is a sign of weakness, and America needs to operate from strength.
I want to ask you now for a strong message to Christians who feel as though they came under attack yesterday by the President of the United States. What is your word to those of faith today?
Pray for our president. I think he's deeply misguided and confused. Pray for our country. We need leaders who will defend the integrity of our nation and to continue to stand up for what you know is right.
The other thing that I'm curious about, though, with this president is, you know, no one has ever said they weren't the Christian Crusades. So why can't he call this radical Islam? I think it's interesting the timing, though, that he's making these comments, because he spoke after meeting with Muslim leaders, and that was an off-the-record thing that we all knew was going to happen earlier this week, and now it's happened. And it was the first roundtable with a Muslim-only group that he's had since taking office. Now, consider what's happened in the last 6 years. Did you hear what I just said? The first roundtable with a Muslim-only group since he's taken office. There's a lot. I mean, he could have had one pretty much at any point in his presidency, and it would have been applicable to what has been going on. But that aside, I do think the timing is interesting. We don't know all the notes and details that came out of that meeting because only so much has been made public. But I'd be curious to know if some of the language that he's using now wasn't informed maybe by what happened.
I also understand that the values of Christianity led to the end of slavery and the end of Jim Crow.
Bingo.
If anybody has read anything in the last
But he also got the
50
facts
years.
wrong. I mean, Ambassador Bolton, when he mentioned the Spanish Inquisition, where people died not by the church killing them on a witch hunt, it was by Spanish authorities. And you think about those 100 people that died, that's a normal lunch break for Boko Haram.
Yeah, look, by referring to the Crusades, he validated one of al-Qaeda and ISIS's main points. It was Osama bin Laden that called Americans in the West crusaders. And he said, yeah, basically we're crusaders.
But you have to put those misdeeds into context. For example, the president talked about the Crusades. The Crusades were terrible, but they were also the reaction to hundreds of years of Muslim aggression and oppression that preceded them. And yet, in the 450 years of the Inquisition, you had about 2,200 people who were killed. That's about 5 a year. More people were killed in a single day by Muslim terrorists on 9/11 than in the entire Inquisition put together. And that is why this equivalence doesn't hold up.
Also, Doctor, the Crusades were 1,000 years ago. You know, ISIS is burning up people today and crucifying kids over in the Middle East today.
Yes. That's exactly right. And look, we need to say something that is politically incorrect, but is absolutely true.
Go ahead.
And that is, okay, that is when these Christian nut jobs do things that are wrong and violent, they are acting in opposition to their faith. You cannot find a single verse in the New Testament that commands violence against unbelievers. But when these radical Islamists commit acts of terror, they can point to numerous verses in the Quran that say to commit violence against the infidels. You know, Jesus said, love your enemies. Muhammad said, crucify your enemies, amputate their limbs. Jesus was the Prince of Peace. Muhammad was the Prince of War. The fact is, those are the facts, and facts are stubborn things.
Should Christians be offended by what the president said yesterday?
I think they should be offended by the president. You know, this is a rare talent to be able to stand up at a prayer breakfast and both deny the root of Islamic terrorism and at the same time degrade Christians. I mean, it's unbelievable that he would do that. But again, Christianity is going to survive President Obama. And my problem with this, Steve, is this is a part of a disturbing pattern of the president. Last week, he said he refused to acknowledge that this was a religious war. Well, from our perspective, this is not a religious war, but from radical Islamist perspective, this is a religious war, and we will never understand or be able to defeat our enemy if we first don't understand.
Obama's speech at the National Prayer Breakfast was nothing more than code speak, celebrating Islam and celebrating his Islamic proclivities and sympathies. When Obama said, our job is to be true to him, his word and his commandments, he was talking about the prophet, so-called prophet Muhammad. When he said that he has sought his guidance and for his entire life and for leading our nation, he wasn't talking about God. He wasn't talking about Jesus Christ. He was talking about that pedophile Muhammad. When he said we are summoned to push back against those who try to distort our religion, need I remind you that those words came out of the mouth of the man that said the future must not belong to those who slander the prophet of Islam? This whole thing was about his Islamic sympathies, his Islamic proclivities, and his love and worship. Who was it that said the most beautiful sound he had ever heard was the call to worship for Islam? I didn't hear him say that about Jesus Christ. I didn't hear him say he loved to hear the church bells ringing. Why be upset? Why be upset that this man goes to the National Prayer Breakfast and says things so offensive and repulsive? He was doing what he is. Why is that surprising? The surprising thing is that he's still in office.